Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Jonathan.
And today we're talking about The Last Jedi. All right, well, before we dive in, I want to be very clear on the nature of this episode here, which is that we are going to be talking about The Last Jedi and Star Wars where Anthem is coming out next week.
Just kidding. Big deal.
But sandwiching that discussion is going to be answers from previous questions we've asked on the cast.
Yep.
We always ask a question at the end of the episode. People leave comments below, and it's awesome, and we love it. We're going to be talking about those and what's been going on in our lives this week.
Isn't it pronounced sandwiching?
Sandwiching? Mm-hmm. Maybe, I don't know.
That's a normal thing.
And then at the end of the episode, like normal, we're going to go through some questions that you guys have posted using hashtag AskCovenant. And again, in the middle of that is going to be a rambunctious discussion on The Last Jedi.
Also worth noting is either myself or Zach, I cannot tell, are just like itching for, not a fight, but like we're high energy, we're ready to go. There's just a lot of sass.
What's my energy? Chopped liver over
I
here?
don't know. I mean, I guess Robert, I'll put Robert on this too now.
So the thing is, Jonathan works right there.
I do.
And I work over here.
Yep.
And there's a hand thing full of things swirling. And there's an energy about, I think, both of us.
It's in a cloud.
That's true, just the network going everywhere. But I think it really started, actually, honestly, if I'm trying to boil it down, it started with last week, off camera, we were talking about net neutrality.
Sure.
And then that got me like riled up.
Yep.
How long were you guys talking about that?
For like 2 hours.
Yeah, it seemed like a long time.
But then since then, everything from net neutrality, the important topics, net neutrality, porgs.
Yeah, then got involved. Anyhow, Wayne Slater? Everybody?
Yeah, Salter.
Wonder if he's related.
I think it's
to
Salter.
S-A-L-T-E-R.
It's Salter. Yeah,
Salter.
it says my Salter.
Wayne Salter says, great cast, guys. This is a comment from
Thank you.
The last one. Really enjoy all your content. Thank you again. I think the theme is a huge part of teaching games. If the theme of a game does not appeal to the individual's group that you are teaching it to, it is a lot harder to get them to accept or buy into it. So my top tip is to find a theme or type of a game you know your audience will have some form of connections to and experience in. Now, this is very important. And in fact, I would actually say, the majority of the comments that we got with tips for how to teach people was talking about theme and looking into theme and like making sure that people are on board with that theme. And I think particularly Star Wars is a very good one.
I was going to say, what do you think it is about theme that is so helpful?
Well, I mean, it's just, you don't watch a show that you're not into. You don't go see a movie and you don't read a book that you're not into. Why would you play a game that you're not into?
Do you think any of it, I think that's important for just general interest.
Yeah.
It's like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatever. But do you think any of it is relating to having a framework for how this is supposed to work?
Yes. Zach,
because
that is so accurate, 100%.
I thought you would say it because I know you've done that training, but it's like I know what, like when I know Darth Vader as a character, and so in any of the games,
right.
I have a framework for how he should operate and what he should be trying to do. And so you just naturally incentivize them to do, hopefully, whatever the game's wanting to do.
No, I think that's exactly right. As I was talking about on the teaching podcast, Scaffold Learning says that all learning goes from the known to the new. And so building a bridge into any world, if you can have an established bridge that people are familiar with, then it's a much easier journey for them. You want to limit the amount of stuff they are unfamiliar with to as low as possible. And so theme, being sort of this overarching big thing, can help people understand, well, this should be doing this, and actually kind of make those connections themselves in a scaffold learning way. It's like, Darth Vader should be able to use a lightsaber. How do I make Darth Vader use a lightsaber? Here's how you do it. That kind of a thing. And so that really can help. He goes on to ask, which we're going to sneak a little question in.
Question and answer time.
While talking about themes, and as big of a Star Wars fan, I'd like to ask Covenant, as a big Star Wars fan, what do you guys think is going to happen to the Star Wars LCG? And he's not the only person that asked this. Is it dead? Question mark.
Oh, it died a long time ago.
Or he does ask. 2.0 core box and a rotation, bring it back to life, just like Netrunner. Thanks again for your great content. Thank you, Wayne. I wish I lived closer, and we wish you lived closer as well. Love for you to come in and play any amount of
I'll borrow your standard refrain, because I think it's deeply accurate, and I think observed by most everybody who looked at or played the game. That first cycle was so deeply problematic for what first cycle of a game should be doing for it. That was, I don't know, just a big speed bump, if not a murder horn kind of a situation for the game's history.
I think there's a lot of factors involved here. Not only was it released on the tail of X-Wing, not only was the first cycle, it was very thematic, but it was so thematic that it only really worked with itself.
Didn't work with the core box.
Yeah, and then there was also, paired with 6 months of that cycle, there were 10 other months of no products coming out for the game. And so you had a very similar game that should be an expandable, ever-changing, like even L5R, we saw the 6-pack, 6 weeks, blitzing to just get an environment out that wasn't just the core set. And so it had a fair number of struggles, but I think, to answer the question, could it come back? Could it resurge?
Thing come in?
I think possibly. I think Star Wars and an LCG can work, absolutely. But at the same time, it's like there's a lot of Star Wars games right now, and this game is somewhat run its course, I think. And I expect it to probably finish at some point. I don't know.
I hope they just put it in the, Conquest game format. Keep the Star Wars theme, all that kind of stuff, but just put it in the Conquest game system.
Oh, okay.
Ditch all that stuff, because it's, I think, one of
grab
their...
the System of Conquest,
Correct.
because they lost for the 40K license.
Correct.
Slap Star Wars on it.
But
ready to go.
LCG, here we go.
I mean, to be fair, that's not out of the realm of possibility, because
print,
I think it's pretty easy to understand that the Conquest system was built off of the mistakes and what was learned, I guess, from the Star Wars
the
LCG
lessons.
system.
It's so much better. Yeah.
But I mean, the other thing I will I remember where I was going to go
I'll
with
tell
that.
you,
I was like, I
let me tell
had
you
something with the Conquest thing.
Let me tell you something. So I've been doing a lot of Star Wars research for this podcast. And one of the things that Star Wars was based on is the movies of Akira Kurosawa, samurai movies. So I'm wondering if they could reskin the L5R system for Star Wars. Just put that in your thinking caps.
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
But yeah, I will
say
it's a great game and a great community, and there's a lot of people that I've met through Zach playing that have just been fantastic. A lot of people that Zach has met, I'm sure that
such
are also
a good.
fantastic.
So two things I want to mention to kind of wrap it back to the teaching element.
Yeah.
I think another kind of problem with the Star Wars SCG, I did a very quick little review video when it first came out. Like I was giving my thoughts on the game, and even in that video, I was saying, hey, if you get to game 10 or 15, it clicks,
You're
and you're gonna love it. But
it's quite a learning curve.
The barrier to entry to learning the game and actually appreciating what's really going on was very high, which is another one of the struggles that the game had. Yeah. So, do I think it could happen? Yes. Do I think it could work? Star Wars and an LCG? Yes. Do I think it will happen? Unlikely.
Yeah.
The system. I mean, the system's not bad.
I think
there's
in time
a lot
it
of
might.
organizational and what's the word where you send stuff out?
Testing.
Deployment?
Deployment mistakes that happened.
I see.
Operational sort
Development.
of mistakes, development mistakes.
That's what you're saying.
And I just don't know at this point with the momentum FFG has on other games, and even other Star Wars games, if it's worth using their limited resources to resuscitate it.
Quick question, though.
Yeah.
What happened this week in your life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Nothing. It was fantastic. I know.
Finally.
I know Zach is always interested whenever I spend at least 24 hours at home or sleep in my own bed on a weekend. And this
Top
was
priority
Zach is
for me.
always interested in that.
this is one of those weekends. This
Telling you
is,
it's a wild week.
right
Right here.
The first time since I purchased the land and the house that I was able to spend 24 hours straight on it, and it was amazing.
That's awesome.
Just, I mean, it's. I was, writing up my Christmas list this week, and it's just, it's it. It's the only thing I've ever wanted, and it's there. So I'm just very, very pleased with it. That's it.
Again, congratulations. But part two, maybe that's why you have so much fighting energy. Is like you're resting.
Yeah,
for the first time.
that's right. I don't have any more.
You don't have a major struggle happening in your life, so you got to point it at me.
Villain.
Me and the porgs, right?
Geez, Zach.
All right, let's. What about you, Robert?
Let's see. First, I'm going to kick it off with this comment from Tristan Wolf. He says, kind of hate to go back to last week's topic, but there were some interesting points made about people who don't play in tournaments or pitch their first two matches to get to what they expect is a more balanced matchup for them. In Go and chess, many tournaments are run with initial seedings based on a rating system. Chess regularly uses the ELO rating system, while Go has its own distribution of rankings. I would find it interesting to see game tournaments, especially in popular games such as L5R, consider using such a system for pairings. How much better would it feel if the very first match at a tournament felt like a fair and balanced matchup for you because it was based on your performance at previous tournaments and perhaps an official online platform, and your wins were what drove you towards tougher opponents and a better overall placement, question mark. It's very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of room for that, I think, but at the same time, I feel like these games are more community-centric, and that having that kind of mix-up, even though
Just the random...
Yeah, that random first round, it's like, oh, I get the opportunity to sit across from the national champion, just at
and you meet him.
Get to meet him, get to establish a connection, rather it be essentially forever stratified at the highest level of play, where it's like, oh, I'm only ever going to play somebody who's either really good, middle of the road, not so great.
Well, and I think another way to use this would be, to me, on a way more like local level.
I agree.
Where you have, there's like a ladder league system that I think people have used, where you effectively can only challenge people who are above you in the rankings, and you're supposed to play, one game a week or whatever against someone, and it naturally encourages you to play someone like in your realm. And even locally, if there was a ranking system, you could be aware of someone's rank and be like, oh, he's a grandmaster. Like a grandmaster at chess isn't. It would be fun to play once. And it would last about 2 minutes.
Right, but you at least know what you're getting yourself into, which could have its benefits, especially for new people that say, okay, well, I got trounced, but this guy's like 1,000 levels above.
Super good. And I also think the general just Swiss format does a really good job of kind of catering to all audiences, because like if you're super casual and you just want to play those, you can still play in a tournament and know that a couple rounds in you'll be at that kind of level. But also if you're somewhere in the middle, where like you could beat the national champion but you don't expect to, being able to get that challenge is pretty cool.
And I mean, there is something to be said that chess is sort of its own institution, apart from the more community-based games that we play. I mean, no one, as far as I know, is devoting their life to making an AI that can beat the world champion of L5R. That's
complex.
Right, yeah, but they are doing that with Go, and they are doing that with chess. And there's a different sort of notion whenever you're playing chess, especially in that environment, that it is ultra competitive. And I think the jury's still out. It certainly is for me, on if ultra competitive is the way to go with these sorts of games. Now, if you could get where you're always having fun and you're always feeling challenged but not overly challenged, again, kind of going back to this little scaffold learning thing, with every matchup that you enter, that would be ideal, because that suits your ultra competitive players, that suits your just starting players. Potentially an ELO rating system or something like that is worth looking at. I don't know. I think there's an answer out there.
And I also think in terms of ELO, I know a lot of players want that kind of a thing for Destiny or X-Wing, but it could be interesting to me less as a way to like rank the players, because that's the point, and more as a tool to understand skill levels of players, kind of a thing. So there's some work to be done there. Anything interesting in Robert's life?
My goodness, it is
only
both.
Thing I've heard about.
Yeah, my gosh, I got a new game over the last week. It's called Stellaris. A computer game. Let me tell you, this game is the bee's knees.
And did you randomly just stumble on this, or
no? So I'm a kind of a longtime junkie for what apparently are known as grand strategy games. So take your standard strategy
Civilization?
game. Maybe they would call Civilization one, but I don't think so. These are like intensive.
So Crusader Kings.
Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis, and now these are all made by the same company, Paradox.
It does a great job.
This one's called Stellaris. It is a space 4X grand strategy game. And it is deeply entertaining, highly addictive for me. It has one of those kind of play experiences, which I haven't had in a long time, where you're doing your thing, you're having a great time, and then you glance over the clock and you're just like horrified that 2 hours have passed. It's like, that felt like 15 minutes. I had no idea. Wow. Staying up later than I want and all that kind of a thing. But this game, it's really good. Check it out. If you're into those kinds of things, the interface is pretty polished, so the complexity is manageable. But there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to
Are you playing extensively against computers, or
yes,
is there a human element?
I've only recently gotten it, so I'm still learning quite a bit. I don't think it if I were to
there is that option there.
Yes, you can definitely do multiplayer. I very much like to know exactly what I'm doing before I engage with a human opponent or even a ally, just out of consideration because it's like,
don't wanna be a weak ally.
how do I build ships? It's like, oh, come on, you know how to build ships.
Come on.
That kind
Hit
of
the
a thing.
buttons
Yeah,
faster.
just do it. We got an incoming fleet.
But it's
but
very good.
check it out. Has very good public reception, and I just couldn't say enough good things about it. A lot of replayability, customization,
Nice soundtrack.
everything I like. Oh goodness, the soundtrack is
It's important.
great, beautifully scored, space like opera kind of soundtrack. It's everything you want.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to move on unless you have anything else on
that's
Stellaris
about-
we really need to know.
I would take too deep of a plunge. We'd be here for the next.
Yeah, we
that's
just
a
did
future
that.
episode.
By the way, one quick thing on if you have a friend, and this you don't have to play these deep strategy games, but
If you don't have a
that plays
friend,
them,
I'm sorry.
ask them about it because the stories these things generate are amazing.
Are great.
I'll just listen to like Robert weave yarns about his Crusader Kings, and it's fantastic.
There's a lot of cool stuff that
A lot
can
of,
happen.
lot of great things.
That's awesome. All right, my answer that I'm reading is Michael Ormiston, and he's talking about teaching games. Says that the best way to teach a game is to strip down to what you really enjoy about the game. Don't try to explain every rule in the book. Get to the fun and add spice later. Example: X-Wing. Teach the maneuvers and the dice, but don't teach people about squad points, upgrades, special characters, etc. until after the first game. We talked about that a little bit in that
couldn't agree
episode on teaching games.
Keep it simple.
I think that's completely right. That's part of what makes X-Wing so great, is that it is very teachable. You can strip it down. You can literally just do maneuvers.
Yeah.
No shooting, no dice,
and
no
it's still
stats.
fun.
And it's still like, oh, I'm flying a ship around and then and build upon there.
That's the really, I love that, and I wish there were more things either built into starter sets or beginners games that took this into consideration, where you just strip it down to its absolute minimal mechanics. First of all, to see if they're fun from a game design perspective, but then second of all, that it becomes very easy to teach that way.
Sure.
We'll see.
And as far as my week, kind of related a little bit in this, the stripping it down. We had the anniversary of Destiny happening this past week. It's official like worldwide release, and we had an anniversary draft, which was really cool.
Oh, nice.
We did 2 packs from each of the first 3 sets, and that's what we were drafting, which was fascinating because I hadn't really thought about the original set. I mean, I constructed-wise have thought about it, but you make those like, what do I think is good decisions way back then.
Yeah.
But opening the pack again, because we've been drafting Empire at War, which is the latest set, and it was just like, oh my goodness, like these cards are insane. Insanely good, actually. But it was really fun, and I think to kind of hit on the breaking it down, the draft, I'm super pumped for the official draft to come out. I think that's going to be huge for that game.
Cool.
I'm so
Huge deal.
excited.
All right, now it's time to dive in.
Let's rev those engines.
Last Jedi. So I'm going to kick it off here. This will go up basically a week before the movie comes out.
Okay.
We've seen, I think, 2 official 2-minute trailers. That's what's been released to the world. And then there's a handful of shorter
Teasers.
And of course there's interviews and conversations and everything swirling around. But I'd be curious to get your general impressions about The Last Jedi at this point of time.
Okay. Do you want me to start?
Well, I looked at you.
All right. So here's the deal. I have a rating index that I was given by the internet.
It's called 1 to 10.
And
It's called a scale.
It's the
You have small numbers on one side.
It's the exploding helicopter scale. And the amount of exploding helicopters in the trailer is directly proportional to how bad the movie is going to be.
So is 0 an awesome movie?
0 is, something that I'm going to give my time to, basically. You can, this is a great test case for this is Transformers or Jumanji. They're going to have exploding helicopters everywhere. I don't know about Jumanji. Please
It
don't
looks
get me
funny.
wrong.
No, that new Jumanji trailer. No, thank you.
No?
Well, no. Did you see that trailer? They made a jab on board gaming. As part of the very
didn't
first
see
part.
that.
So they get sucked into essentially a console, and they have the old board game from the previous movie, and they literally say, who plays board games anymore? And then they toss it to
Bring
the
it
side.
on. I'm looking for a
Yeah.
fight.
Ready to go. So I saw a lot of, now, granted, there were no exploding
I was
helicopters.
going to say, I don't
in trailers
remember
I've
a
seen,
single helicopter.
But I have seen a lot of what I would consider exploding helicopters in the trailers that have been released. So, that said, I am a little bit worried because when I see things like the porg squawking at the camera, the explosion-ridden space fight where Kylo's flying through there, very reminiscent of the prequels. And the Crystal Fox, again, front and center on the camera, just to look how cool our CGI is. I know there's practical effects foxes. This one was not. I get worried because a lot of times that can mean that the people that are involved are way more interested in what is being shown than what is being felt. Like, look at the redo of the original trilogy. How many more, TIE fighters can we pack into this scene? Like, that was the death of what Star Wars was. And I see a lot of that stuff, and it worries me a little bit.
Death is a bit strong there.
Well, not death, I guess. Sure, I'll take it. Whatever.
Vegetative state.
Vegetative state. Yeah, it was certainly.
I'm not sure they will.
I feel like it was certainly, it was apart from what people wanted. I think the box office numbers would agree with me on that. So I see a lot of that. However, I also see Mark Hamill going on talk shows and being like, the script is awesome. The director is awesome.
He's contractually obligated to say all that.
Well, but Disney was not contractually obligated to give the guy his own daggum trilogy after this one's over. He directed this movie, and Disney's like, we love what you did. Here's a whole thing.
Which could also mean that, because he was actually, from what I understand, very influential in the Porg. Mm-hmm. Like, that was his baby.
I read into that more business continuity issues than necessarily performance or quality stuff, because they had some serious issues with direction, vision, etc. during the development of this movie in particular, maybe Force Awakens as well. I can't quite recall the history, but it's been troubled because there's a lot on the line. Directors have their own take and expectancy for what they want to do.
So maybe he just matched up really well with what Disney wanted him to do.
For sure.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like.
Potentially.
I think it could just be that very, whether it's culturally or what they're after or the way they work meshes very well. But while I think that him getting a trilogy is probably a good sign, because Disney seems to know what they're doing in general, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
did you see that Thor movie?
Just both thumbs up there. By the way, speaking of exploding helicopters, watch the Thor trailer. Anyways.
Yeah, no kidding.
Probably right.
Fair point. But that doesn't necessarily mean to me that it's going to result in the kind of Star Wars that you were after. Because one thing I know is that Disney is phenomenal at printing money.
Right.
And I think you look at, they're good at it.
Tell the Secret Service.
But when I look at Porgs, right, it's like, as you see here in front of us.
Good job.
Yeah, really just got him off of his rocker there. Obviously, that's a great merchandising item.
Yes, it is. Now, let me.
But have you heard the story of where it comes from?
No,
Porgs?
tell me.
Yeah.
Do your best to make me like this.
It's very short.
Okay.
So the same director that just got a trilogy for stars, Ryan
yeah.
Johnson.
Go ahead.
There's the script, right? Whatever. It was written, and they're doing the planning. And apparently that was like, he had this idea for this creature that he wanted to sketch out and whatever, and then he really pushed to get it included in the film.
Yeah.
Versus Disney saying, make something we can put in plush.
That actually, I don't
Put in plush.
that's really funny. I don't.
Or just plush it.
It's first of all worth noting that this director was also behind Looper, good movie, and Brick, very good movie. So I think he's got some chops. That said, with the Porg, I'm not bothered by the Porg per se.
I feel like you are.
I am. Look, I went to school for film theory. I took screenwriting classes. I like to believe I at least know what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I really don't like is the acknowledgement of the fourth wall, the acknowledgement of the audience. I think that breaks the whole.
Did you like House of Cards?
Watching it. Yeah, but they did it tastefully. That's like saying
it works in some things.
Election.
I mean, they do
doesn't
it in
work 'cause of the
Shakespeare.
VO. Yeah,
All the time.
but this is not that,
Yeah, sure.
right? They're not, the Porg's not being like squawk, squawk, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I see, and this goes back to the exploding helicopters thing, them putting this Porg front and center as if it was a 3D movie, right? Look at this thing. Look how cute he is. And to me, the original Star Wars movies didn't do a lot of that. And I'm worried, again, what I said before, I'm worried because whenever I start seeing that, you kind of get the idea that the design team and the production team is wanting more cool things shoved at the audience.
Razzle dazzle.
Razzle dazzle. And that's what killed the 3D movie every time they bring it up.
Now,
it looks cool for a while, but people get sick of it very soon. And the one thing that
gimmick.
I want Star Wars to be is timeless.
Well, I was going to say it's important to note how much you value the practical effects
Yes,
and the
and that is
traditional
also very true.
filmmaking and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But the other part is worth recognizing to me, right, is on the decision, even in the trailer, to have the Porg
Right.
as
Front and center.
as front and center as it is pure marketing,
Yes.
right? It's
Well,
like if they're being used tastefully
Right.
in the movie, and they're in there, and then it's like someone's watching it, and they say, we got to make a bunch of toys out of this.
Right.
And then they say, we need to put this in the trailer
Right.
so that we can start selling those toys early, Force Friday.
Yeah.
And also, we want to have a trailer that is going to get as many people to come see this.
Yes.
Because the truth is, I'm going to see it. That trailer could have been like all lightsabers and all CGI, and I still would have saw it.
This is a brilliant point and potentially the best point, which is...
You heard it here.
Ding, 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 ding.
Well,
I'll take my award.
We have
My
in
desk is
this
over here.
office, as you guys may or may not know, Zach is a huge Apple fan, and Apple has a particular brand.
No way.
But recently, Apple started adding emojis into their emails that send. Now, that's pure marketing. And what that is doing is basically getting people into Apple that are not already looking at. They already have a captured audience, and Star Wars already has a captured audience. So, is that allowed? I mean, is that a good thing to kind of go against your brand to cast a wider net? I mean, should L5R, for instance, be selling like chibi dolls with it to get more people who are into anime into it?
Yes.
But I think, but I think on that note, right? It's like the emoji Apple thing is a good example, but also slightly different in that asking the question, "What is Star Wars and who is it for?"
Yes.
And I think, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned,
who is it for?
who is it for, right? And it's like the most intense Star Wars fans who've read all the books and all the comics and all that stuff.
All the defunct lore now?
Yeah, right.
Scuttle.
See, yeah, that's a lot of effort. That's just no, I'm just kidding. It was enjoyable while it was there. Anyways,
Okay, all of it's worth to you.
but to
didn't it?
me, it's like you were saying. Not only do I think Star Wars is timeless, but I think Star Wars is universal, and so it is attempting to be something that can appeal to anybody.
Interesting point.
So pairing with that, though, right? So like we saw in the 2000s and now recently, the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels,
Right, yeah.
which are animated cartoons that are primarily targeted at the younger audience, but at the
Yes.
same time have a great story,
Yeah.
have character development,
Yes.
involve some of the characters that you're very familiar with,
Yes.
and I very much enjoy those. But you have something like a Porg where it's like you do have 6 or 7-year-olds watching these shows who might be going to see this movie.
And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, having a bridge for people to hold on to as you bring them into a new reality is very worthwhile. So maybe a cute thing is what Disney is hoping brings in a whole new generation of people.
I think a pretty good comparative, which I think Porgs are Ewoks done correctly.
Sure.
Which
I
is-
can
Yeah,
see
they're
that.
not going to destroy
But again,
the finest legion of
it's-
No,
best
like-
troops.
It's
I
not.
hope not anyway.
I mean,
So
the
Give him a
Ewoks-
blaster. We'll find out.
I think people had a problem with the Ewoks for the same reason that I have a problem with the Porg. I don't object to them in theory. I object to their winking at the camera. That drives me crazy.
See, I'm still not convinced they were winking at the camera.
Well,
But
I don't know. Well, it's sort of like what frequently has to happen in any movie where if we were to pull out all the levity from the plot and any individual scenes so that if it were gone, what you're left with is ultimately a war film. Where it's very bleak, it's very heavy, and you have a lot of these serious events and topics going on. And without those kinds of things, particularly in a movie, in a modern sense of what the expectation is for those things, people walk out of them feeling exhausted,
Yes.
unenthusiastic, and just bleak about the world. Let's go have a winter in Siberia, why don't we? So I think that they are a little bit necessary to break up that kind of dark monotony. But at the same time, I do have a little bit of agreement that it's this kitschy thing that seems more about merchandising than, say, Han or Chewie or somebody with like that thread of comic relief potential, busting a joke, having a funny moment with somebody, that kind of a thing,
And, like-
which felt is what they did more often than not in the original trilogy. They didn't need to go slapstick mode with an Ewok
Yeah,
necessarily.
they just had a trash can with lights, and that was good enough. I mean, that's really my question about the Porg in general. Like, R2-D2 served that purpose, and I actually, I'll get to that later, hopefully. But R2-D2 served that purpose in the first trilogy. But people were laughing at him. He was able to
And
break
3PO.
the tension, and 3PO, very much so, very much
yeah.
so.
3PO is hilarious.
But they were funny because they mattered, because they were established. When R2, beeped in a certain way, like the woo kind of stuff, like he had already had a personality. I'm worried that the Porg and the Ice Fox's personality is just going to be cool, cute thing. And that's what bothers me, that there's going to be like a lack of depth there when, especially when it's fantastical like it is, it needs to have some sort of physicality and some sort of depth.
Well, I know. So speaking to those particular things, because I know that's like the thing that stuck out the most in the trailer for you.
Yeah, well, that was
the porg in the
that was
icebox
yeah, it was
and
very
the
and the
explosions.
explosion. It was very indicative of the things that worry me.
But I think there's a set of things outside of the context of him getting his own trilogy, even that makes me at least willing to wait to be concerned until I've seen the movie, which is like both the porgs and the icebox have a CGI version and a practical effects version, and like the porg I think is a mixture of both things.
There's a scene in one of the trailers where Chewie knocks the porg off the dash, and it is practical and looks great.
And it's just a real thing sitting there. So there's the practical element of that, and then asking the question like, would the ice fox or the crystal fox or the porg exist in this universe? And I think what we haven't seen a ton of in the movies, at least if you talk about the prequels, there was a little more, but it was heavily CGI based, is like really thinking and looking at thousands of planets and the creatures and like in the books it explores it way more. Like there's all kinds of creatures. Some of them are described as cute, some of them are more terrifying. But I mean, I'm fine with them adding creatures to the universe.
Yeah,
it's just what I don't expect is the porg to take an AT-ST down.
Yeah,
which is fine.
And like I could totally see where Chewie gets the porg because he misses Han. That's kind of a cool idea. But it's just I like comedy and I like breaking the tension, but I don't think that it needs to necessarily venture into slapstick.
Sure.
See, 3PO it worked with, and the porg I just don't know if I'm going to have enough attachment to it for it to like fly up against the window and me to not think that that's kitschy.
Yeah, we will see.
We will see.
But I will also. I don't think you'll feel that way after the movie. The other thing I want to mention is the importance of the fox in. You're like, what is happening?
In the stars.
No, in Star Wars Rebels.
Okay.
They're.
Oh, okay. I'm interested.
There's some mystical. So the planet that the main character Ezra is from, Lothal. There's some important
Do the foxes have
mythical
midichlorians?
foxes. Apparently everyone does, including us. But the short version is, I think because I saw the video where they're like. The animatronics, the face of the fox. So I will see if I like it or not, but I have him expecting that fox to talk and to actually be a character.
If it talks and it's got the animatronics for it, because the practical effects fox looks amazing.
Talking's crossing a line for me. In Star Wars, just a little bit.
You have walking carpet talking.
If they're going to be, if they're talking, they need to be bipedal, so I can at least think, they're humanoid of some sense and semi-intelligent. I don't know.
So we'll see. But there's definitely
Bipedal
some
bias
force mystical, creatures in that category,
Sure.
and so. It might not just be like a flashy like here's a creature on the planet that's shiny and like there's no way they're making that face to like just have it run around.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Hopefully not. The other thing. So here's the other thing. We were talking about what is Star Wars just a minute ago.
Yeah.
And you had said potentially if you strip it all away, it's a war movie. I don't know if that was your exact point.
They were saying if you strip all the like relief moments away, any movie that's like this would become.
But I look at Star Wars and I really think that it is more of sort of it's a western. It's a space western in much the same vein as Firefly. And what the problem is, with some samurai.
I was gonna say but that's the thing. It's universal.
Which
man.
It's very much like Firefly. You have the samurai, and you have it's based on the Seven Samurai. It's based on Hidden Fortress, I think, actually one of the original ones.
I've seen that.
Yeah, it's very good. Anyhow, I worry that with all the new technology available to people, and this is a CGI versus practical effects kind of a thing, that whenever you have practical effects, they are going by their very nature to be shiny. And that's just what they look like, and they all are at this point, 20 years down the road, going to look like cartoons. That's just how CGI looks. Whereas practical effects are going to be timeless. They're going to be around forever. But they also have that added benefit of seeming lived in just by the very nature of the fact that they are physical things. And I worry that, again, like the fight where they're blowing everything up, like you lose a certain amount of, again, physicality. You have to build that bridge. When you're doing something so fantastical, if you have it all in what is basically a cartoon and you're trying to present it as reality, I think there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance, or a little like an uncanny valley. Whereas they could fix that if they really went heavy. And that's something that Star Wars has hung its hat on since the beginning. And it's not just an idea that like, I love practical effects, but particularly for Star Wars, it is the thing that did more with practical effects than any other movie ever has.
But I would contextualize that based based off of the capacities of when and where they were being made. They they literally didn't have CGI when the originals were being made, but I think George Lucas's philosophy is very much in line using whatever the best, latest, and greatest whatever.
Well, and really pushing forward.
Yeah, pushing forward and being innovative, on his effects and being state-of-the-art, you know, look at, what is it, Lucas, no, the...
ILM.
That.
Yes.
Industrial Light and Magic.
Thank you, yes. That whole studio, prior to Weta that did The Lord of the Rings, it stood alone as the premier studio that could do any of these kinds of things that you're looking to have done. So even though I very much agree in terms of the disparity between practical and then CGI type effects, that I think it's still philosophically in their wheelhouse.
I think it's philosophically still in George Lucas's wheelhouse, but I think that
just Star Wars.
I think it misses the mark, and I would like to compare it to the remake of Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they looked at that, and there was a myriad of things they could have improved, and they could have moved to CGI. But they stuck with practical effects because that was part of the charm and part of the timelessness. And I think that applies maybe even doubly so to Star Wars for the reasons that it should be dusty, it should be lived in, it should be Western, and that's. I mean, that's not necessarily to say that like they don't need to be pushing the limits. I would love to see them push the limits of practical effects. And my goodness, if you've seen the armature for that Crystal Fox, they have. But this reliance on the CGI, especially in these big scenes, I think you at least lose me, and maybe I'm an old curmudgeon, like you know, maybe I'm just. But to me, Star Wars was a thing like. It's like if they remade Dark Crystal in CGI, you know.
Well, that wouldn't work. But if we can digress a bit, I really want them to pony up and do the most difficult thing well again, which is the writing. I think the original trilogy in particular, certainly not the prequels, I think we can all agree on that. The original trilogy was just very well written. The prequels were not. But it is the underpinning of everything you're going to do. What the characters are going to say, what the plot is, and all these kinds of things. And even for me, looking back on The Force Awakens, I was exceedingly disappointed because here we have this universe that is wholly original and ripe for more of the same, and we get a rehashed New Hope plot. Just new trappings, new everything, and as soon as I was like coming to terms with that, seeing it for the first time in the theater, it was just quickly running through the list of, okay, who has to die in this one to round out the effects kind of a thing, and quickly you know, kind of start predicting, it has to be, spoiler alert, Han Solo. But when it even comes down to chemistry between characters, they did a better job in Force Awakens of showing us rather than telling us what characters are like, but they still, to me, have a long way to go for, like, example, Poe, exceedingly likable character, but likable to a fault kind of a thing, where it is just so overwhelmingly obvious that I'm just supposed to essentially adore this guy, which ain't a problem. But when it comes to somebody who was more nuanced, a character like Han Solo, Princess Leia, or even Luke, these are characters that have seemingly warts. If Poe had one, it would come as news to me. But these are characters who are complex, well fleshed out, and I feel like what they've done in the more modern hashes of all of these Star Wars movies, including the prequels, is really just kind of like trope them out way too heavily. And that's fine to do with macro plot elements, I think, and you know, this is a story about good and evil and family and you know, all these kinds of things. But when it comes to a character, it's like, this is the likable guy, and this is the person who's the clumsy buffoon, and then this is the brain. It's just kind of like,
this is actually what you're saying.
Some chemistry here.
Really helped me sort of define some of the things that are bothering me about that. And the whole thing seems, if there is such a thing, too polished. As in they've buffed all of the warts, all of the traits off everything, off the CGI, off the effects, off the characters. It just sort of, it's like they didn't read the first line of the crawl. It's a long time ago. Like, that's the thing. This is an ancient society. You know, this is not new, flashy, cool stuff. That was the problem with the prequels, and that's where I see it veering towards now. but it's similar. You kind of see this thread going through the new movies that it is very easily accessible. It is very buffed out, so to speak. And I worry about that. Now, again, hopefully, I've heard great things about the script. It's supposed to be very good. The director is very good. I'm willing to be surprised, and I'm also willing to bet that this is a marketing ploy to get more people in the theater than normally would.
Which is a lot.
Which is a lot.
Yeah,
So
they're going to make some money.
before I get to the real question, I just want to caveat and say a few things. One, I love The Force Awakens for a lot of reasons. I think you make some good points. I also think you're wrong on some things. But that's I feel like there's no way there's time to dive completely.
Well,
into that.
give me some
Side
bullet
note,
points.
All right. A little context. So with Poe, from what I understand, originally when they have the TIE fighter crash, he died. And he was out of the movie. That was the end of his arc.
Well, great.
But then when they were doing the initial showing stuff off,
test screen.
people
"We like
loved this guy so much that they actually
They didn't have time to give him a personality.
brought him back. They were. It was just like, here's a guy, right?
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah,
fix it
fix it
right
in
on
post. But the other, Force Awakens, I recently rewatched it, and granted, the meta level plot of bad guys build a big thing that blows up planets. Good guys find a way to get in, blow up bad
Somebody
thing.
dies along the way.
Somebody there's that, and the thing about it is,
We have a new Yoda. She wears glasses.
I wouldn't say that's
practical.
Yoda.
Oh my goodness.
But
the sagely
hold on.
diminutive character with a whole lot of personality.
On a weird planet.
On a weird planet. Got their own little setup.
A secret knowledge of the Jedi.
Okay, sure. Let's calm it down.
You're
Calm it back.
stretch-
But
stretching.
I will say about Force Awakens, the introduction of Rey
Yeah.
is maybe
Great.
the
Yes,
best character
it's fantastic.
introduction.
I agree.
It's fantastic.
No doubt
It
about
checks
it.
all the
In Star
boxes.
Wars. It's
Practical effects,
showing, not
Western
telling.
theme, showing, not telling.
Just
the
you
whole
learn
thing.
everything you need to know.
But did she have to be
creepy.
on yet another desert planet?
Yes,
What
that's
is
fine.
this, Dune?
I'm okay
But that's
with that.
I want to just point out, because I'm sure a lot of people watching
just a joke.
feel this
I'm a
way.
little worried
But
about all that.
there's a lot of people that will be like the plot. You have whatever's going on, and then you have the main characters from this planet,
Tatooine.
and it's like, why is she suddenly super good at everything she's doing? But it runs very deep, because every time there's a lot of nuance in that movie, I think, and I think by the end of the trilogy that we are now getting, the perspective on Force Awakens will be slightly different. Granted, there was a big thing that blew things up.
Yeah.
You can't take that away. But
I think more than anything, it was a stabilization attempt,
I very
because
much
the
agree with you.
prequel trilogy had the entire franchise hemorrhaging enthusiasm, general interest, and becoming a brand that was more equated with kitsch and mediocrity than being new and original and innovative, which is what the original show
So I
was.
wonder if the strategy with these movies, then, if you want to talk about strategy, was the first movie was to get rally the base back, and the second movie, given the trailers that we've seen, is to expand that base.
Which may
I
be
think
very
that's
well true,
a pretty smart move ultimately, and it gives a very good reason for why The Force Awakens is what it is.
And if we're going to template this, this is going to be the peer of, as the middle film to Empire Strikes Back and Attack of the Clowns. So we need to have a home run of a movie here. And if
this
it's gonna
is where
at
the
all
trilogy
measure
lives
up.
or dies.
That's right.
In
think
my
so?
opinion, I think this is obviously
Well,
it's the
'cause
middle act.
If
If they stabilized with Force Awakens, now's the time for them to show us that
They-
they can do something new, something that is truly excellent and fundamental movie.
But I will say, on slightly back to The Force Awakens, because the next question I'm going to ask is, what is The Last Jedi going to have to do for you to walk away saying, mission accomplished? So be thinking about that.
I got it.
But the thing
Ready.
for me with Force Awakens is there are a handful of important and distinct differences that I think make it a very different movie. Obviously, you have very different characters involved in this. And while there are some archetypes of the character that dies, and you have the wise character that knows about the Force, they're filled by different characters with different traits and playing very different roles. Because even when I'm thinking about Kylo Ren, and you guys are aware of how awesome I think Darth Vader is, right?
He thinks he's very awesome.
Very awesome, high on the charts.
Like number one, I would
He's
say.
still
And
thinking about getting his name changed.
It's funny because
If he could legally become a
Zach
Darth,
Vader?
well, no, for a long time I was intending to name my firstborn son Darth. so that the name would be Darth Bun, and then they could be, anyways, that's a different thing. But I would never do that. It's a joke. But the thing about it to me, right, and this is kind of, I think, symbolic of, and I want to mention Finn, don't let me forget Finn, to talk about the new trilogy, which is Darth Vader is a very, we're talking about tropes or we're talking about very specific things happening. It's like
evil.
He's a very one-dimensional, scary, terrifying, bad character, especially in A New Hope, with literally no other. He's just the ultimate bad. Right? It's a bad guy. And then even in Empire Strikes Back, you learn he has a master, and it's like, and there's no question they're on the same team. Like this is very flatline, whatever. But like to me, Kylo is 10 times more interesting as an actual character. When I was 7 and as Darth Vader, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the most intense. I'm terrified in like a cool way. But the reason I'm saying that is like a lot of the same stuff is happening,
right?
Especially from like a plot level. But you have characters that are wildly different, just really way differently. Even Kylo being very. Like, I'm not certain that he and Snoke are really on the same team.
Or just Kylo being not certain.
Kylo's not certain. And so, anyways, all that to say, that movie, while the plot of that first act was structured very similar to A New Hope, unquestionable, I think it left us in a spot that is far different than A New Hope left us in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not a carbon copy for sure, but to me, it was the underscore is. They, I believe, still could have done that kind of commercial stabilization of the franchise without having to rely on essentially a templated plot structure from whatever episode 4 show.
Yeah. So there's more on that. I have like I said, I could go on because there's actually a big point to it. And the shortest version that I can say is that essentially setting up Leia and Han and Luke. Or even Luke, where he kind of walks away, and structuring the Force as a character that is essentially repeating a cycle to balance things, and that after Luke setting up the Jedi Academy, all this goes wrong, awful things happen. It's like his answer is, "I'm out." It's like instead of just doing what the Force wants me to do, I'm going to make it come to me, kind of a situation. And there's a big long rant on that. But going back to The Last Jedi. What is it that you would want to see out of this movie, because we're going to see it next week, that will have you leaving saying, this movie was awesome, I am excited to see the end of this trilogy, and I'm very excited about the future of Star Wars?
For me, it's always pretty much with anything that I think is worth enjoying or having again is, does it nail the fundamentals? Is the writing good? Is the acting good? Is the editing particularly good? The prequels were very, very poorly edited. But all those kinds of things together, I want a holistically sound movie, because any one of those things, if done to a substandard fashion, particularly with the capabilities and financing that these kinds of projects have, they should be able to get the best in the world on these projects. So that's essentially what my expectation is. That's what I'm looking for. I know Star Wars as a franchise is more than capable of delivering on all points. If you have somebody who is in a position, what's his name, Rian Johnson, can presumably deliver on that. And I think ultimately that was the failing of the prequels, is that when George Lucas was making the original trilogy, he was a younger man. He was hungry for success and to make a demonstration of his capacities, his talent, etc. He was an ambitious dude, and he delivered. But then he became older, perhaps more complacent, less energetic.
I think the difference is, sorry to interrupt, I think the difference is that he was younger, highly ambitious, but restricted in any number of ways.
Yeah, the adversity element.
Budget, the thing about the creativity. But and then when you got to the prequels, everyone just said yes to everything that he did. And I think that became a problem. Also, his wife, now ex-wife, edited the first three, the originals, and she is a fantastic editor.
Did a great job.
On par with the editor of Mad Max Fury Road, which is also kind of worth noting on how someone did a reboot correctly using practical effects and Western type sensibilities.
Got it.
But I think it's definitely worth noting that I don't know that he was complacent so much as he just didn't have enough friction to actually build up good ideas. He went with what I felt read like the first draft of the script, the first draft of the characters, the first thing he thought of, because everyone thought he was a genius by this point, so
but
no one was questioning
I
him.
think complacency still has a place there because somebody of his filmmaking pedigree
Should be challenging himself.
well, should know better when it's in front of him.
that's right.
Yeah.
Because I know even when I'm, I can write in sentence and it's like, grammatical errors or it just sucks.
Yeah.
I should go back and do something.
He sort of
about that.
believed his own hype.
I
think, is
agree.
one of the big
I
reasons.
also wonder how much of it just is related to, even I remember reading an article recently where it's like him saying that he doesn't think dialogue is important in a movie, where it's like visuals and sound are what he's focused on.
Yeah.
Because I remember hearing the story of, the famous, like, I love you, I know, Leia Han scene. And it's like,
That was written on
Harrison
ad-libs.
Yeah.
Ford just said that because he was in character,
Yeah.
and that obviously makes a lot of sense, and it's great. And so, like, and I when you watch the old videos of Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher talking about scenes, and it's like, George really wasn't, especially on the dialogue, anywhere near close. And that's
Which is why you need those good actors to be in a position to lend their perspective and talent into the life of that character.
And, it's obviously like, if you get to George Lucas in 1999 making episode 1 and you're Hayden Christensen,
Here's
in
your
2001,
lines.
it's like,
Yeah.
here's your line, and then you do it, and he says, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, no,
Cut.
chills,
Where's
please.
my next latte?
And not to also, while we're on it, let's not
forget.
Let's not forget Frank Oz. Let's not forget all of the designers of the practical effects. Let's not forget
Who does the
Williams?
music?
John
Yeah.
John Williams.
the,
Never heard of
the original sketch artist that did a lot of the sketches as well, whose name escapes me, but I love him.
Also,
Joey Jojo
on
Shabadoo.
the John Williams note in Force Awakens, I actually, on first viewing and first couple listens of the score for Force Awakens, I wasn't like blown away, but I will say over time, like I rewatched it again, and I very much, especially Rey and Kylo's themes, which obviously you want to be good.
Yeah,
And then the
there's
mix of
actually a
Vader.
really great video on YouTube about the sound of Star Wars. I think it's a Captain Kristen, whatever that guy's name is.
So for you, what would make this film a success?
What would make it a
Besides billions of
success
dollars.
for me would be that it felt, I don't know, like Star Wars. I guess there's something, I don't want it to feel like a polished 3D movie.
But you liked Force Awakens, right?
Yes, I did. But 3D, but they use a ton of practical effects. Like the fact that they're not. I didn't like Maz, whatever.
Yeah.
The fact that they are,
Originally
as
supposed to be
far as I can
practical.
tell, animating.
Supposed to be what?
Practical. They had a puppet, and then he just wasn't ever happy with it, so
Yeah.
they had to go with it.
But-
that movie was also made on a crunch.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Don't crunch your creatives.
The fact that Snoke, as far as I can tell, is CGI, like in Legend or Legion or whatever that one Will Smith movie was, is just a bad decision. I think. I think that's going to take people out of it. It's going to take me out of it. I want to be engrossed in a dusty old sci-fi world. And again, maybe
I have
I'm
a
a
perfect movie
curmudgeon.
for
Maybe
you.
I'm a curmudgeon.
It's called A New Hope.
But I want to. That's what I want. I want it to feel like what I think Star Wars should feel like, which is a terrible metric. Yeah, I mean it's not
can be done.
great, but I am definitely open. I am definitely willing to see what happens. I think they could go some really cool ways. I'm not going in there with too awful of a mindset, but I want it to feel real. Like I want to feel like I'm on another planet. That's what I want.
Well, for me, the main thing is going to be I want good writing, like that. Still, every time I actually quote
Makes
the
or breaks.
prequels a lot because
First
it's
thing
just
they
so
do.
humorous to me, humorously bad. But then honestly, like I'm most hopeful that it will go differently than I even expect. My general expectation is that at least, again, reading the books, watching Rebels, and doing all the wild stuff, it's like I think that they're going to potentially explore the like balance, grade space in between light and dark, no absolute good or bad kind of a situation.
Relativism, huh?
We are. This is
Or I think it's going to be about balance. I think that's going to be the core element that's happening here because I think they're trying to wrap up the Skywalker thing.
Yeah.
And it's been about balance since the beginning.
Yeah.
I think it's
Well, I don't know. I don't
since
think
past
we.
a New
Yeah,
Hope.
yeah. I don't think we
Bring
heard about
balance
balance
to the Force.
in the original trilogy.
Yeah, they
at all.
said bring balance to the Force. That was the big prophecy.
Well, that was in the prequels.
Yeah, that was in the prequels.
In the middle, in the Empire Strikes Back, the concept of bringing balance back
And that was
introduced.
Because that was assumed that he would face off against Darth Vader and bring balance because they were two weights. But now it seems like there's a third choice.
The moderate option, I guess. Anyways, we'll see. But I'm
independent Jedi.
I want characters to get developed. I want to learn more.
Yep.
I think I'm going to like Kylo a whole lot by the end of this. I would love to see Rey go to the dark side. Side note, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd love it. And as long as it's not awful dialogue and, basically destroying Star Wars as I know it, then it's going to be hard for me to be upset. I mean, I know you guys were, I think you in particular more so, were huge fans of Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was great. I like Force Awakens better for basically writing reasons.
Sure.
I think Jen, first half of the movie, is just not as good as she should be. But like, I don't know. I'm not one of those people who like goes into a movie and is so serious about this universe or this movie that like, if they decide that Luke Skywalker wasn't married to Mara Jade, I'm not going to be offended.
Sure.
I'm just hopeful. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited as well.
Who else would he be married to?
The Force.
Whoever Rey's mom is. Spoiler. I don't actually know that. All right.
Oh wait, I'm supposed to remind you about Finn before we get out of here.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. System works.
Why we write notes.
Final note, I guess for me, I wasn't planning on ending here, but going back to Force Awakens, Finn as a character to me is very important because
Where does accent go though? I miss that British accent.
Why can Daisy have an accent?
Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
But
That's true. I
the
will
thing
be.
about Finn to me
got a good
is,
haircut.
and this is kind of why I like Force Awakens so much, like when you compare it to A New Hope, is that in the same way that Vader was just kind of very one-dimensional and just, the bad guy.
That works so well though.
I'm not saying it's bad,
It's so good.
but you definitely don't do it again.
Yeah.
But he's elemental.
But
he's like as an element.
Trust me,
He's evil.
I love Vader. Like, don't get me wrong.
Well, no, yeah, I'm just saying that in the context of the movie, that was integral.
Yeah, but in the original trilogy, it's very much here are the bad guys, here are the good guys.
Yes, right,
and so to me, introducing Finn as a character who is basically a stormtrooper, a defecting stormtrooper who was kidnapped and made to be a stormtrooper and trained and brainwashed and all this.
Was he kidnapped?
Yeah, child soldier.
Oh, okay.
He mentions like being taken from a family I've never met.
Okay, didn't recall that.
Anyways, so the thing for me about that is that and this is why I think they're going to go the gray, middle, moderate Jedi route or the mid-balance thing, because the bad guys are even being set up to not just be, these are the bad guys. Which is like, when the Death Star gets blown up, no one's saying, I bet you there were some pretty innocent workers on that station who were just like doing their job,
chicken?
right?
Yeah.
But so like they're already, just by having him as a character, forcing you to acknowledge that like everyone in the First Order isn't just evil. And even Kylo is not just evil. Like he's got these things going on.
And I don't remember what video this is from, but there's another online video that talks about this. But Finn is the first time that a stormtrooper has a face, but also establishes that stormtroopers can recant, defect, and so every stormtrooper anyone kills from now on is a potential ally that they just decide to off instead. So it becomes everything starts to become very gray.
It's a lot of pragmatism. Yeah.
So anyways, I think that's what will get explored, and I think it somewhat makes sense. We're kind of in a time as a culture that is not as black and white, right? Like I think in the 70s, it's like a lot of things that are being talked about are very right or wrong.
I mean, you look at, I think that's, we could go very far.
Like, I just opened
but
a can.
you do look at the internet and you can see someone's heartfelt opinion on any subject and kind of get a certain amount of amount of empathy for like who they are as actual people, and that wasn't as available until the advent of the internet. I think that was the big thing, and so as we begin to see all of the colors in the spectrum, we realize that there are much more than the black and the white.
There's a lot going on. So hopefully that's what the rest of these movies show.
I think that would be very right.
That'd be great.
All right, we're going to move along to questions. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant, and we'll answer your question right here on the show. First question is going to be geared towards you, Jonathan.
Hello.
I have a question for the next one. Can you talk a bit more about how you go about pre-production, production, and post for your shows? For example, In pre-show, how do you decide what videos to make, what decks to choose and play? Do you have meetings or just hang out and come up with stuff? In production, which is going to be geared towards you, there goes my pen. In production, does one of you have a background in film, and how expensive are your cameras, lights, and lenses? Do you do test runs at all, so on and so forth? And finally, in post, how long does it take you to edit different videos? Do you do live edits for multicam work? What about the card insertion, graphics? Sorry for the geek question, but I love this stuff best. From Miso.
All right, Miso. So let's take them in order. So how do we decide what videos to make? What decks do we choose to play? We do have meetings, and they are basically just us hanging out and coming up with stuff. But that is part of the process. Like, we look very deeply into how we can be most beneficial. Again, it's a limited resources game. How can we do the most with the resources that we have? And so we ask that question, we decide that, and then we begin to put together a plan.
And I think a lot of those questions stem around, why we exist as an entity, and we're trying to help people get into tabletop gaming, get them excited about tabletop gaming, and just make it accessible, right? So meetings are happening. Then we're trying to figure out how best to do that with the time and energy resources.
And it's certainly all evolved over time. When we first started doing tutorials, it was literally Zach would make a deck, Steve would make a deck, they'd shuffle and start playing, and then I would go back through in After Effects and try to make sense out of what they were doing. They would explain it as well, but now it's a lot more thought out and a lot more thought through, because again, we can get much more value that way. So we're kind of always trying to go that direction. Production, I do have a background in film, as mentioned at the top of the show. I took screen studies at OSU, had just started, and wrote my thesis on Godzilla, and that is sort of it. After that, I kind of scrapped together a bunch of stuff. I filmed some documentaries, that sort of a thing. Then I came here, and
I
continue to do it, but now have passed it off to our video guy who's sitting to my right, Ben.
I think the next question is worthwhile. Like, how long does it take you to edit a video?
Yep.
The multicam work, that kind of, and the insertion of graphics and all that.
Just to go ahead, just to be thorough here, though, I have no idea how expensive our cameras are. They're normal DSLR bodies with about, the lenses I think are fairly up there. They're like run and gun 2.8 lenses. The lights are lights I got for the documentary work, which was about 10 years ago now, so I don't remember that one. And we don't really do test runs. It's pretty much all in one shot, although, interesting story, we had been playing around with a sort of podcast-like format, game news kind of a thing for a very long time. Ran a lot of tests, just never worked. Put it back in the back of the mind vaults for a while, and it came back out as this. So that's
as the Covenant Cast.
As the Covenant Cast. How long does it take to edit different videos? Oh, I don't know. I don't do that anymore. Ben does it. So
but it used to take forever.
Okay, yeah. So the first gameplay video I did took a month. The second gameplay video I did took 2 weeks. The third gameplay video, et cetera, and I had it down to 4 hours whenever I handed it off to Ben. And that's just through scripting in After Effects, learning the process, just getting better at stuff.
And that also, it obviously largely depends on the length of the game, the number of cards that are coming on the screen.
The first time you do something, it's always going to take a while because you're developing that system, but then you start to hone the efficiency of the system, and it becomes pretty easy after a while, hopefully. And then the card insertion graphics, that's all through After Effects. I think we've said that a lot. Yeah, just I learned After Effects a couple years ago, loved it, love how powerful it is in any number of ways, and started asking Zach if I could do cool stuff with After Effects, and he said yes. Again, now it's all passed to Ben, and he's doing a fantastic job. I think that's all the questions.
Nice.
I did it.
I guess we could have broken that down into like 6 episodes.
Yeah, one,
answer this one, answer that.
two.
All right, the final question we're going to ask here is from Raul. He wants to know, what tournament style will Team Covenant be running for the Destiny Regional coming up next year, which is likely to see more player base, which is kind of 2 different questions. A couple answers. So Covenant Tulsa Regional is February 23rd. We're going to be doing the standard format, which is basically everything that's out is legal at this point, at this juncture. As far as which one is likely to see more of a player base, I don't know. We're going to Adepticon in March, and Steve and I are actually playing in the Destiny, one of the Destiny Galactic qualifiers, but it's the trilogy format. And so the only set that will be legal for that is Legacies, which I think is very cool, especially for people getting into a game. Much smaller card pool. It's a little more like sealed or draft in that like there's not as many crazy combinations of things out there. So I'll actually be very curious to see how popular that is and the kind of decks that come out and how much fun is had at an event with a much more limited card pool. But in the short run, in February for our regional, it'll be everything that's out, and hopefully at that point, Legacies. So
Sounds like fun.
see you there, Raul. Because I know you'll be there. All right, remember, you can use the hashtag AskCovenant to get your question answered here on the show. We always end by asking you a question. We'd love to see your answer in the comments below. And the question for this week is, what are you hoping to see in The Last Jedi? Until next time, keep playing.